Hi everybody, it's Claire Mockridge here, anti and postnatal fitness expert, and today I'm giving you some information about how pelvic floor exercise has changed in recent years. Now the Kegel, it's a squeeze and release or draw up and hold of the pelvic floor, has up until now been quite a healthy option, I suppose, really for fixing pelvic floor dysfunction. But in sort of the fitness industry and any sort of pelvic floor health industry, we're sort of moving away a little bit from the old school sort of Kegel, because put simply, if there's any sort of dysfunction which relates to the pelvic floor muscles being quite tight, actually what the pelvic floor needs is a good old stretch really first before we can kind of start training it. Because if your pelvic floor is quite tight as a result of sort of injury during childbirth or whatever the dysfunction is, then it needs stretching out, and it won't really matter how many Kegels you do. You can squeeze and release your pelvic floor till the end of the day, but it's that pelvic floor dysfunction, that tightness, will actually make the pelvic floor even tighter still. Does that kind of make sense? So what we need to kind of do is actually stretch the pelvic floor first before we start kind of hitting it with any sort of squeezing and releasing and contraction that way. So also what we've discovered in recent years when we're dealing with pelvic floor dysfunction and exercise relating to the pelvic floor muscles, what we find is particularly stress incontinence, so that's where you kind of laugh, or you cough, or you sneeze, or you move, or you do exercise, so perhaps just even sort of running up and down the stairs unknowingly, just you completely forgot that you've got stress incontinence, and a little bit of wee pops out there. That's not good news, okay? You shouldn't really be on any sort of impact of the pelvic floor, so whether that's sort of something like a laugh or a cough or a sneeze, and that amount of pressure that's placed on that pelvic floor, if that pelvic floor isn't strong enough to withstand that pressure, then leakage occurs. So that's kind of the basics of stress incontinence. So what we've found is that there's definitely a link between movement and pelvic floor dysfunction. So stress incontinence sometimes occurs on a movement. So as I say there, if you just sort of step down to pick your baby up and then stand up quickly, or if you run up and down the stairs forgetting that you have this dysfunction in your pelvic floor and a little bit of urine sort of leaks out, then that's actually what stress incontinence is. So we're moving now on to movement-based pelvic floor exercise and education. So we're doing things like a squat, which helps stretch the pelvic floor muscles, and also it works the pelvic floor without you even having to switch it on. There'll be other sort of forms of exercise as well, like a lunge or something. That's where you take a step forwards and drop the back knee down towards the floor. So that also works the pelvic floor. So these are that's actually how we're sort of moving on from just the old school kind of Kegels. There are movements that we do in either an exercise realm or a Pilates sort of based environment that work the pelvic floor without you having to squeeze and release and draw up and hold those muscles. So I hope that's giving you a little bit of information about how the pelvic floor and exercise relating to that actually has evolved over recent years. If you'd like further information, you can obviously check out my website. I've got quite an extensive blog, so if you check out clairemockridge.com/blog and just hit the pelvic floor sort of section, you'll see a whole host of information relating to the pelvic floor in there. So any further questions, do get in touch, and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks very much for watching.